Hi, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I'm Matt Finch, and I'm here with Greg Gillespie, and we are going to talk about a couple of things. First of all, Greg is the author of a couple of fairly major old-school gaming projects, both of them megadungeon styled. One of them is Barrowmaze, which is the earlier one, and now he's got a new Archaia megadungeon that's out, and we're going to talk about those, and then I think we're going to have a lead-in in which we move on to general megadungeon theory after we talk about the particular two projects that he's got. And before we get into it, I'd just like to remind everybody, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't. We're going to be having many more videos like this with major folks in the OSR and a lot of people who have done really good stuff but aren't necessarily well known. And if you want to get notifications of those videos, subscribing is the easiest way to do that. So please go ahead and hit that button. Okay, Greg, that's my big introduction. Let's talk about Archaia and Barrowmaze. Why don't you just you and I met years ago at North Texas when you had just done the Barrowmaze project. So go ahead and start in with that. What was it all about?
Sure. Well, I'll give you a little bit of general background. So I'm an academic, and so I was sort of interested in, I'd finished a major project, and then I wanted to do something that was completely different, and I started studying nostalgia and retro games. And I did that academically for a couple of years and had a grad student in the area, that sort of thing. And then I thought to myself, I really love retro games. And at the time, the OSR was really finding its feet. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be fun to write a retro game now that I've sort of studied them from an academic point of view. And concurrent with that, my gaming group, we were sort of in the situation where people would show up the night we were going to game and not give me any indication as to what they wanted to do or where they wanted to go. So I thought, okay, well, I need to start creating a dungeon and something that would make an interesting point of departure and that would bring some structure to the weekly gaming group. So I started drafting Barrowmaze, and it sort of developed in two parts. So the first was like half of the dungeon because I'd never done anything sort of non-academic. So as an academic, all we do is we worry about the content, and layout and art and all that stuff is up to somebody else. And then so I had to sort of work through that process, and very thankfully people in the OSR worked with me as I sort of blundered along and made my mistakes. And then I did the second part of Barrowmaze, which was on Indiegogo as Barrowmaze 2. And then I brought those two together with new material and art and all that stuff in what we see as Barrowmaze Complete. And so that's sort of the evolution of how that's happened. And it's been such an enjoyable process, and I've sort of met so many people in the hobby, and I really enjoy making the dungeons. So then I ran the Kickstarter last year for the Forbidden Caverns of Archaia, and then that one's just come out. So that's a little bit of the background on how I went from point A to point B. I'm not sure if I touched on exactly what you wanted me to, but I'm happy to go back and lap over that with whatever specific material you want me to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that was exactly. I let you go on a little bit there, but it was because you were already answering a lot of the questions that I would have asked about the process. So now, in terms of game system, Barrowmaze and Archaia as well are written for Labyrinth Lord. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so Labyrinth Lord, for anybody who doesn't know, is a retro clone of what's known as the Moldvay basic set. It was the second basic set that TSR came out with. It was very early in the 80s. It's very highly regarded as being a fairly elegant version of D&D that is relatively complete for use. It's rules light. It's simpler to use than original Dungeons and Dragons. And right at that time, there were sort of three versions of Dungeons and Dragons. One of them was original D&D that was still being sold. One of them was advanced D&D, and advanced D&D had a high enough learning curve, and OD&D was incomplete enough that TSR came out with this first basic set, which a lot of people have now taken and used as a primary gaming system. And Labyrinth Lord is a retro clone of that, and being a retro clone, it allowed publications like Barrowmaze to come out because there was a licensing, an open license on that. So,
just to add to that, Matt, the reason why I play Labyrinth Lord is that when I was playing first edition, the two things I hated most about the game were things like weapon speed factors and counting segments for spells. The game bogged down to its sort of actuarial roots at that with those types of things. So I like the basic engine, and then I like the chrome of the advanced game added to that, so that it plays a little faster, and that's so it's D&D 0.75, as James Malazewski said many years ago, and which sort of resonated with me at the time. So that's some of the reasons why that's an enjoyable game for me.
Yep. And so now I would sort of ask the question of, do you think that out of the various editions of D&D that there's any one that's more workable for a mega dungeon? But I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be not really. But do you have any thoughts on that in terms of editions and mega dungeons?
Not really, because I think it comes down to play style more than anything else. Particularly, like if we're talking, OD&D or basic or AD&D characters, aren't sufficiently high powered that they have to play a little bit cautiously. But sort of after that point, where hit points increase and powers increase and proficiencies and so on and so forth, then the play style can change. And then, of course, the change in how experience is provided also factors into how people play the game. So for me, I guess it would be those two things.
Okay. And then moving back to the actual two projects, what is the difference in gaming terms or environment or genre or whatever it might be between Barrowmaze and Archaia?
Sure. Well, here's a general idea about mega dungeons that informs both projects. So, we all have the traditional notion of the mega dungeon as this multi-tiered deal that sort of corresponds with character ability, roughly speaking, level 1, level 2, and so on and so forth. And to me, that's really arteriosclerotic. I want to broaden the definition of what constitutes a mega dungeon. So Barrowmaze emphasize the idea of sprawl, where you could walk into a level 2 area or a level 3 area adjacent to a level 1 area and not have that definitive stairway that signals to the players they're moving from one area to another. And then with Forbidden Caverns, again, I wanted to just try to broaden the notion of the mega dungeon, present it in a slightly different fashion. Now, so it rather than having the sprawl of Barrowmaze, Forbidden Caverns is pulls from things like the Caves of Chaos, and it pulls from hex mapping, and with many different locations, dungeons big and small, located reasonably close to each other, and then a larger sort of underground layer for more high-level adventuring towards the end. So I'm trying to just broaden the traditional notion of the mega dungeon. And having said that, I do get people that email me and say, I would really, really like you to do a traditional mega dungeon with those tiers all lined up. And
sure,
I'll get there. I might get there, but I'm not done. Some of the other stuff I want to do first.
Okay, so let's we'll sort of wrap up this first part of a three-part thing that you and I were talking about, and we'll see whether the timing works out well on all of it. But before we move on to talking about mega dungeons in general, talk about I don't know if I assume Barrowmaze is still available in some sort of electronic format, and how do people get copies of Barrowmaze and Archaia if they want to get copies of them?
They're on RPG Now, both as PDF and print on demand. And I've printed off if you get the PDF, it comes with the poster maps, and I've printed those off, and they look really sweet. So you can I just take them to a copy center or what have you, and you can print them off there.
All right, fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and start moving on to the next segment. So for now, until you hit on the next piece of the playlist. Whatever version of D&D it is that you play, imagine the hell out of it.